go to your kitchen right now. Open the fridge or the freezer or that cupboard where you keep the tin stuff. If there's a meat pie in there, I need you to pick it up and turn it over. Look at the ingredients list. Because what you're about to hear in this video is going to change the way you think about every pie you've ever eaten. Here's the question nobody's asking. When you buy a meat pie, how much of it is actually meat? 20%? 30%? You'd hope so, right? After all, it's got the word meat right there in the name. But the reality is far worse than you think. Some of the most popular pies in UK supermarkets contain more water, more starch, and more palm oil than they do actual meat. And the law lets them get away with it. In this video, we're counting down the 8 worst meat pies on UK supermarket shelves, exposing exactly what's inside them, and at the end, we'll reveal 3 pies that are actually worth your money. Let's get into it! Before we start the countdown, you'll need to understand the rules. Under UK law, a product labelled as a meat pie only needs to contain a minimum of around 12.5% meat. Let that sink in! You can call something a meat pie with barely 1/8 of it being actual meat. The rest can be water, flour, modified starch, palm oil, flavourings, and a cocktail of stabilizers and emulsifiers. And here's where it gets even more confusing. UK law defines meat as skeletal muscle with naturally included fat and connective tissue. That sounds reasonable until you realise how generous those fat allowances are. For pork, up to 30% of the declared meat can be fat and 25% connective tissue. For poultry, it's 15% fat and 10% connective tissue. So when a label says 20% pork, a significant chunk of that 20% could be fat and gristle, not lean meat. Then there's mechanically separated meat, or MSM. This is the stuff scraped off bones by machines after all the real cuts have been removed. It's a slurry of meat paste that's had its muscle fibre structure destroyed. Under UK law, MSM doesn't even count as meat. It has to be declared separately on the label. But it's still in there, bulking out your pie. The Food Standards Agency ran surveillance testing in recent years and found that 40% of frozen raw chicken products were non-compliant, mostly due to undeclared or excess added water. And 42% of frozen beef burgers failed testing, with 8 out of 24 samples containing less meat than declared on the label. If they're doing it with burgers and chicken, do you really think pies are any different? Right, let's start the countdown. Starting at number 8, an icon of British convenience food, the Fray Bentos steak and gravy pie. This tinned pie has been a covered staple since the 1960s, but let's look at what's actually in it. First ingredient is water, not beef, not pastry, water. The beef content is listed at around 25%, which sounds acceptable until you remember that includes fat and connective tissue. This to the filling is modified. Maize starch, wheat flour, salt, caramel colour, and flavourings. It's essentially beef flavoured gravy with a pastry hat. In 2018, Fray Bentos' manufacturer Baxter's was forced to admit they'd quietly reduced the meat content of their pies. Their spokesperson blamed inflationary pressures on commodities. Translation: they took out the meat and hoped you wouldn't notice. Customers absolutely noticed. Reviews described the pies as mostly slop with barely 2 lumps of meat. Baxter's eventually apologised and claimed to restore the recipe, but the trust was already broken. Number 7. The Tesco Everyday Value Steak Pie. At under £1 per pie, you might think you're getting a bargain, but the price tells you everything you need to know. The beef content hovers around the mid-teens in percentage terms. Water, wheat, flour, and palm oil make up the bulk. Modified maize starch thickens the gravy, which is essentially flavoured water held together by processed starch. There's also pea protein in some formulations, used as a cheap filler to bulk out the texture without adding actual meat. The pastry is a mixture of wheat flour and palm oil, not butter. Not even lard, which would at least give it some traditional character. Palm oil, the same ingredient that's devastating rainforests is what's holding your pie together. And the sodium content per pie is significant, often hitting over a gram of salt, which is nearly 1/5 of your recommended daily intake in a single pie. Number 6. Holland's meat and potato pie, a northern institution, football grounds, chip shops, corner shops. Holland's pies are everywhere across the north of England. But let's read the label. The meat content in a standard Holland's meat and potato pie is listed at around 24% beef. Again, that includes fat and connective tissue under the legal definition. The ingredient list features the usual suspects: water, wheat flour, potato, beef, lard, modified starch, salt, and a string of emulsifiers, stabilizers, and flavor enhancers. Here's the thing that caught my attention: rusk. Holland's pies contain rusk, which is essentially dried breadcrumbs. It's there to absorb moisture and bulk out the filling. You're paying for meat and getting breadcrumbs mixed in. The gelling agent's also worth noting: E407, which is carrageenan, and various stabilizers that give the filling that slightly gelatinous texture that no homemade pie has ever had. Great question. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what's your go-to pie? Are any of these brands in your kitchen right now? Drop a pie emoji if you've ever eaten one of these without checking the label. And if you're finding this useful, hit subscribe, because next week we're doing bacon, and what we found is going to make you angry. Number 5. Asda, smart price, steak pies, the budget end of the budget range. The beef content in these pies can sit as low as the mid-teens. The rest is water, wheat flour, palm oil, modified starch, onion powder, caramel color, and various E numbers to hold the whole thing together. When you look at the nutritional breakdown, the fat content is alarmingly high relative to the protein content. That tells you that what little meat is in there comes with a lot of fat. The protein content per pie is low enough that you get more protein from a glass of milk. This is where the class angle hits hardest. These are the pies that families on tight budgets are buying to feed their kids something that feels like a proper meal, and the food industry is giving them water, starch and palm oil in a pastry case and calling it a meat pie. The families who can least afford the health consequences are the ones getting the worst products. Number 4, and this one might surprise you, Pukka Pie's Old Steak. Pukka positions itself as a step above the budget brands. The packaging is bold, the marketing is confident, and the price point suggests quality. But let's look at the numbers. The beef content in a Pukka All Steak pie is listed at around 33%. Better than the budget brands, absolutely. But that still means 2/3 of the pie is not beef. What fills the gap? Water, wheat flour, margarine made from palm and rapeseed oil, modified maize starch, caramel color, and a collection of thickeners and stabilizers. The pastry uses margarine rather than butter. The gravy is starch, thickened flavored water. Pukka's marketing leans heavily into its heritage and its premium positioning, but when you actually read the ingredients, you're getting a product that's 1/3 meat and 2/3 filler. For the price they charge, that's a hard sell once you know the truth. Number 3. The Morrisons own-brand meat pie. What makes this one particularly concerning is the vagueness. Some of these own-brand meat pies don't specify the cut of meat, it's just listed as beef or pork. Under UK law, meat includes skeletal muscle with adherent fat and connective tissue. When a pie says beef at 18% and doesn't specify the cut, you can assume they're using the cheapest trimmings available. The Greenhalgh's Bakery, for comparison, publishes its meat pie recipe openly. Their first ingredient is water, second is wheat flour, and beef comes in at 24%. But they also include lard, rusk, wheat gluten, gelling agents, pea protein, maltodextrin, and waxy maize starch. If that's what an artisan bakery pie contains, imagine what the factory-produced supermarket versions look like when they're trying to hit an even lower price point. Add modified starch, palm oil, and flavorings to the mix, and you're looking at a product where actual meat is a minority ingredient in a pie that's named after it. Number 2. Iceland frozen steak pies. Iceland's freezer range is a lifeline for a lot of families in this country, and that's exactly why this matters. The steak pies from Iceland's value range can contain beef percentages in the low to mid-teens. The rest of the weight is water, pastry made with palm oil, modified starch, onion powder, yeast extract, and various stabilizers. Here's what really gets me. These pies are sold in multi-packs designed for families to stock up on. 4 pies for £2 or £3. When you break down the cost per pie, the math simply doesn't allow for meaningful quantities of actual beef. You cannot produce a beef pie containing real cuts of meat for 50 or 60 pence. The price tells you everything the label is trying to hide. The FSA's own testing found widespread non-compliance in frozen meat products, with products containing less meat than declared. These are the products that slip through the cracks of enforcement. Cheap, high volume, sold in frozen multi-packs, and consumed by the people who trust the label because they don't have time or resources to investigate. And number 1. The worst meat pie product on UK supermarket shelves. Supermarket own brand, frozen and chilled mini pork pies, particularly the party pack and lunchbox varieties. These are everywhere. Every supermarket does them. Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrisons. The party packs that come out for every buffet, every picnic, every child's lunchbox. They look like innocent little pork pies. But turn them over. The pork content in many of these mini pies sits between 20 and 30%. The rest is water-injected pastry, pork jelly made from gelatin and water, modified starch, and a preservative system built around sodium nitrite and various E numbers. The pork itself, under that legal definition, can include up to 30% fat and 25% connective tissue. So your 20% pork can actually be closer to 10% lean meat. But here's the real scandal. These are the products marketed at children. They go in lunchboxes, they go on party plates. Parents buy them thinking they're giving their kids protein. What they're actually giving them is a tiny pastry shell filled with processed meat, water-based jelly, and enough sodium to make a nutritionist wince. And because they're sold as mini or snack size, nobody thinks to check the label. The Melton Mowbray pork pie, for reference, has protected geographical indication status, similar to champagne. To use that name, the pie must be made within a specific zone around Melton Mowbray, using uncured pork that's chopped rather than minced with hand-formed hot water crust pastry. That's what a real pork pie looks like. These mass-produced mini versions are a completely different product wearing the same name. Alright, enough bad news. Let's talk about the pies that are actually worth your money. Number 1. Pierre Minister. Founded in 2003, Pierre Minister uses free-range British chicken, outdoor-bred pork, and grass-fed beef. Their steak pie lists beef at around 40% or higher, with recognizable ingredients like onion, ale, and herbs, no palm oil, no modified starch, multiple Great Taste Awards, available in most major supermarkets and their own restaurants. Yes, they cost more, around £3 to £4 per pie, but you're paying for actual food. Number 2. Higgity. Their pies use free-range eggs, British meat, and butter pastry. The ingredients lists are short and readable. You can pronounce everything on the label. Their chicken and ham hot pie contains real pieces of identifiable meat in a sauce made from actual stock, not starch, thickened water. Available in Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, and others. Number 3. Your local butcher's pie. I know that sounds obvious, but hear me out. A pie from a decent local butcher typically contains 40 to 60% meat, uses lard or butter pastry, and has an ingredient list of about 5 to 8 items. No modified starch! No palm oil. No pea protein filler, no gelling agents. You'll pay £2 to £3 and you'll know exactly what you're eating. Support local, eat better, pay roughly the same as the mid-range supermarket brands. Here's the bottom line. A meat pie should contain meat, pastry, gravy, and seasoning. 4 things, maybe 5 if you're fancy. But the supermarket version has turned one of Britain's most iconic comfort foods into a delivery system for water, starch, and cheap fat. The legal minimum of around 12.5% meat for a product called a meat pie is a disgrace. It means manufacturers can legally sell you something that's nearly 90% not meat and still call it a meat pie. And most of us never think to check. Next week, we're looking at bacon, and honestly, that video made me angrier than this one. If you want to see it, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.